Welcome everyone. Thank you for being here today. This is our fourth session out of our series, our peer-to-peer summer series with New Bedford Creative. I know my name is Margot, but I am Jasmyn Baird. I'm the Senior Creative Fellow with New Bedford Creative, and I'm really excited you all are here today. This series, I know some of you have probably heard this speech over and over, but this series is geared to enrich, educate, and connect creatives within our community. New Bedford is home to many creatives and artists and entrepreneurs. So this session wants to embrace the pulse that makes New Bedford so unique. Mass Development TDI and the Barr Foundation have funded this program. This is just one component of a broader TDI Creative Cities Initiative to boost our space economic development. In today's session, after I'm done with my spiel, I'm going to pass it over to Lee, who's going to be presenting or starting the conversation for about 15, 20 minutes. And then the last 25, we'll have Q&A, question and answer. If you have any questions while Lee is speaking, you can put it out in the chat. I'll be monitoring it there, but we'll address them once we get to our Q&A. This session will be recorded. It is recording right now. So feel free to be on mute. And then when we open the Q&A, come off mute and we'll start the discussion there with the Q&A. So without further ado, I want to introduce our guest speaker, Lee Heald. Lee is the director of AHA New Bedford, and she'll be presenting to us about developing relationships within the funding matrix. So Lee, thank you so much for being here. And I'll pass it over to you. I'll make you the host and then you can get started.
Great, thanks. So thanks everyone for showing up today. It's summer and I know people are really busy. So I'm always pleased to talk to peers and colleagues. I think it's great. I know that you've had people talk to you about like where to find grants and the 5 components of any major grant piece. And so I want to take some time to really be in a conversation to think about how you strategize and how you think about grants and the grant cycle. Because it's it's kind of an ongoing pursuit. And so if I said to you, and people are now not on camera, but how many people have written grants? I know that Patty has, Laura has, Den has. And so the other question I would ask, because if people sort of put their hands up and say yes, the companion question I want to ask with that is, how many of you have deep and abiding friendships? Yeah, there you go. So when a lot of times when people write grants and you talk about it and you kind of come into these workshops, you think there's going to be a magic answer. Oh, Laura Marie has never written a grant. Okay, so hang in there. This will make sense to you and you'll start off on the right foot. A lot of times when people write grants or have to write grants or think they need money, they come into this experience and it is like the final exam when you were in a course in college that wasn't really perfect for you. You thought you'd wait till the last minute, you'd throw a Hail Mary pass, you'd do whatever you had to do, and you would hopefully make it through that window. Grants is a really different thing, and sort of those funding relationship is more like thinking about long-term friendships. It's really about nurturing them. It's about communicating, it's about being in the world with people on an ongoing basis. Okay, so who is 508-98222? Can you mute yourself? Because we're getting feedback from you. Perfect, thank you. So it's really kind of thinking about a cycle, and this is the book I love. It's called The Cycle, and I'm going to put up a handout from it. It's about Michael Kaiser, and he really talks about all of the pieces of being in a nonprofit and how you need to think about you platform, you think about who's in the room with you, you think about what you have as a mission, what you present as a program and a platform, how you build your audience, and how you then seek out support. And let me see if I can screen share. Yep. All right, okay, good. So this is Michael Kaiser's quote, and what I love about it is he said, fundraising is about matching the needs of the donor to the needs of the organization. And this is really true. So I mean, I kind of shortened his piece of stuff, But this is really true whether you're talking about private fundraising, private donors, if you're talking about sponsorship, or if you're talking about grants and philanthropy. And the easy way I think to differentiate that is if you're talking about private donors, you're really talking about people who are giving to you because of your brand. So they like something that you're doing, and it's because of your brand. If you think about corporate or like banks or businesses, they are really giving to you because you amplify their brand. So it's kind of about them, what you're doing. And you need to make sure that they are recognized and supported for that. The difference comes when you start applying for grants or philanthropic kind of organizations, because now it's about the us of it. And so it's about what you and that organization are going to do together. So when you think about your mission, you've got programming, you've got evidence of what you do, you've got building and differentiating your brand. And that is because you need to develop a whole series of relationships with private individuals, with corporate sponsorships, and then with philanthropic organizations. And if I were a cleverer person and did great graphics like Jasmyn, I would have put this all in a circle, because this is really what he thinks about as a cycle. And your mission sort of talks about who you market for and how you find your deliverables, and how you build that sense of enthusiasm and engagement about what you're doing. You have to kind of know who you want to be part of your team. You grow your audience, you get a family of supporters, and really thinking about this as a family and friends kind of operation, I think gets you in a very different mindset about both raising money and how you have that conversation, because you're really thinking about the things that that make your friends, and that make you a good friend. So you think about how you connect, customer service or that relationship, about growing the family of supporters, about creating engagement. And that brings you to this whole notion of support. And you have a platform, you have what you're doing, you have different kinds of donors, and the grant's all about what happens for the two of us. And if you do well, that feeds back into your mission, your marketing, and your audience. And so you have to think about this whole notion of writing grants. And this is kind of the conversation I have, is it is something you're doing sort of each and every day. It's not like your final exam in college that you do it once and it's over. It is something you are doing each and every day. I picked up at the bottom of this, there's a little thing about fundraising 101 and the fundraising cycle. These are just from the internet. I just picked them up because everybody has this sort of notion about steps of doing this. But if you're really smart, the steps of doing it aren't really steps. They aren't linear, they're cyclical. And they all have this sort of notion of cultivation, solicitation, and stewardship, which is really taking care of people. And then the next one I picked up was identify, engage, evaluate, solicit, recognize, and steward. It's all about taking care of your donors. And foundations and like the Mass Cultural Council, like Laura's on here from the Local Cultural Council, all of these organizations are about the us of it. So they all have a mission of themselves. If you're in a corporate world, the mission is to be more identified, out in the brand, all of those kind of outward things. A lot of the foundations really talk about higher values, and they are either funded by or funded for doing something in the community, and you can kind of figure out what that is and work with them on it. But it's always about the two of you working together, because it's like a dance. Foundations have to give out money. Mass Cultural Council has to give out money. I'm on the board of Mass Humanities, has to give out money. And so we are always looking for programs and partners which amplify the mission that we have been established to do. And so it's this kind of this, Mass Humanities is a foundation, but we're also kind of a nonprofit. And so you come into these relationships as a nonprofit and you think, well, I'm trying to do this, people need to support me. But if you go into grants, you realize that you are also connecting with, and you need to help them do what they're doing. So the two of you together can have this kind of relationship. I can stop, let's see. I stopped sharing by doing this. Yay. Okay, great. And so that is kind of the notion of kind of the key of what I think about. And so if I were trying to create this conversation, I would think about brand, and I would think about what you appear to do. It's not only what your organization appears to do, but like Gregoire was talking about, it's about what you are. And so when people see you in the street, because most of the small nonprofits are bankable on their leadership portfolio. People bank on people, people connect with people connect with stories, people connect with the experience of stories. And so people think about you and what your brand is. And so are you someone that they can trust? Are you someone who's reliable? Are you someone who follows through? Are you someone who kind of personifies those values of creativity, of expressiveness, of inclusiveness, of diversity? I mean, are you those kinds of traits that they want to be in partnership with? It's like being, I always say, a good friend or a good family member. I mean, it is like being that kind of connected, that you have to have personal values that go along with what your program is about. And so it's not just about writing the fabulous narrative. It's not just about finding a grant writer who's going to write the grant. There's a lot more that goes behind being funded and fundable, and it is a cycle. And it's like, are you curious about what's going on around you? Do you connect? Do you make phone calls? Do you do informational interviews? If I were going into the Mass Cultural Council, I would do an informational interview with the program officer beforehand to make sure I was in the right place and right time. And when we got funded to do the Pride Night for AHA, as soon as our graphics came out, I sent them to the program officer and said, "Oh my gosh, you know, here's our page. It's up. Isn't it fabulous? It looks great." And she wrote back and said, "Oh my God, it's so nice to see it." So it's not just about the final report. It's not just about the end product. It's about those pieces of connecting along the way, because they have funded us as an investment portfolio. And so here's your investment and this is my portfolio. I mean, you kind of need to share those pieces of information. So it's not something that you just do as an end product. I always say that we write notes to our city councilors in the beginning of the year. It's kind of a catch up. It's a, here's what we've been doing. It's a, here's, please think about us. Here's the return on investment that we bring to the community. And so when they start thinking about budget or budget issues, I think if you've made your case for support, you're always making your case for support. You've got to make your case for support ahead of time. You've got to be organized. You've got to know what the metrics of your case for support are, or what the stories are in your case for support. And you're making it all the time. If you are in the public sector trying to get funding, you are writing to your legislators, you are on their Facebook, you are at events, all of those kinds of things. If you're in the city, Patty, I mean, you're writing to your city councilors all the time. You are showing up for Mass Cultural Council funding organizations. You are attending programs that the Community Foundation is doing because they're funding arts and culture. You're going to different meetings. I mean, you have to kind of be out and connected and part of the circle going forward. When you apply to people, I mean, I can tell you this from the Mass Humanities. So we just had a operating support grant go out, and we hired a variety of 10 supervisors, people to read the grants. And so sometimes you think that you may not be well known in the field. But out of these 10 people, one was a historian who just written the book about Douglas. One was somebody who did youth programs in Boston. One did Clementi. One did grants in the Berkshires. I mean, if you are a fundable entity and you have been connected and connecting, then people will know you and your organization by reputation. Even if you don't have that direct idea with people, that is what the review process and the vetting process is all about. And so getting yourself out there, and again, being part of that cycle of communication, that you have a platform, you have a marketing plan, you have a program that's worth supporting, that will kind of get you into that support network. And it's something that is ongoing. The other thing to think about is, so Bristol County Savings Bank gave AHA some money a year ago, or 2 years ago, actually, 19. And I went to them and said, "Oh, great, you're supporting us. Will you put us on all of your marketing materials?" So you always think that you include the tagline for the bank, but the bank has marketing opportunities, and they want to own you to talk to their clients for that. And so although Bristol County Savings Bank funds as a foundation, in some ways they're also still in that marketing piece. And so you have to sort of think about what you can do for or with the foundation that you're working with. Is it promotion for them? Is it marketing? Is it recognition? Is it visibility? Is it having their staff work with you? Kind of what is that opportunity for them and you together so that you get funding to do what it is that is in your mission? How can you help them? I think it's also important not only to think about branding and connecting, but to think about context. So right now, the opportunities in this past year have been for programs that are looking at housing, shelter, basic needs, food insecurity. There's a whole range of things that are very prevalent: diversity, equity, inclusion, access, all of those kinds of pieces. And so I always think about making a shopping list. So I always have, I don't know, 10 projects or things that I'm interested in, or things that when we think about our mission, we will move forward for AHA, for instance. So we're always interested in programming by the month. We were interested in communication. So we were looking for money to redo our website. We were looking for money to do a virtual website this past year in the pandemic. We were looking for money to do some strategic planning to move forward. I will eventually retire. And so we're kind of looking at succession planning and how does that work? We're trying to look at how to move out and be more connected with the suburbs. We've done really well with the city. How do we kind of move into the suburbs? Because we were originally an economic development program. And so trying to engage, keep the suburbs engaged, because the suburbs are changing pretty dramatically around New Bedford, and kind of have programming that keeps them engaged. So, I mean, I have a long laundry list of some of it is planning, some of it is specific, some of it's targeted, some of it's programming. You can frequently get corporate sponsors for. Some of it is project-based. So we look at like the Mass Cultural Council or the local cultural council to do some stuff that is not as brandable by specific corporate sponsors. And so we look at the local cultural council to do some of that work with us. And you kind of have a laundry list. So when the context comes out and people think about, okay, now we are really focused on opportunities for diversity, equity, for instance. It's like, well, what in your portfolio do you need help with around diversity, equity? You can't dream up a project to get it funded, but you really can think about a rounder, again, this whole cycle thing, a rounder view of what you are. So it's not a straight linear piece from I'm here and I'm going there, but you kind of have to think about the roundness of that and who can you have those conversations with? Because it's always about connecting and conversations and kind of filling in those pieces of the gap. It's like Velcro to think about. I always think about context as Velcro. So you've got a lot of different things that you want to do, and kind of what's the sticky piece? What's the piece that's going to stick? What's the piece that's going to adhere? And if you're building a platform, you're always building a platform. And so kind of what are those things on your platform that are going to help you and get you to adhere to a bigger program for yourself? Yeah, I think that is kind of my message and my context. I mean, I'm happy to answer questions or to think about that with people or to develop special strategies about that. I mean, I know that you've been talked to. So, I mean, in addition to your shopping list of all the things you want to do, you always need a shopping list that has your narrative. I mean, people have talked to you about your narrative. I was talking to Gregoire about his budget. I mean, you need a real narrative, a real budget, a real timeline, and you need to learn how to do timelines. You need to think about evaluation. How are you going to know when you've been successful? Wait a minute. And then you need to think about how you do goals and objectives, because people want outcomes-based work these days. So they want to know what, as a result of funding you to do what you're going to do what is on their list, how is the world going to be changed? And so the narrative is something you always need in your back pocket. And it has history, it has contemporary world right now, what you're doing, and then what you're going to be as a result of doing any of this work. It's those three parts. And if you're really smart, you would be able to boil down your narrative to an elevator speech. because everyone has to be on the same talking points, and you always have to think about being on message. I mean, the media talks about being on message, and we always think, yeah, sure. We're in the nonprofits. We've got a big story to tell. But in point of fact, people are going to know what you're doing. You're on message. So AHA was the second, arts and culture free Thursday night downtown. But we always say we are an arts and culture program that is changing and refiguring downtown New Bedford by using creativity, collaboration, and the creative economy to kind of change the figure of downtown. And when you look at our narrative, it talks about the past history of that and the present and the future. And so you need to be able to sort of think about small points and amplify them. It's people get lost in their narrative because they think, oh, if I have big words and big ideas and big things, it's going to be wonderful. And the thing is, when you read a lot of these things, you can really pick out the three people who really know what they're doing. They know why they're there, they know why they're in the room, they know what they're supposed to be doing, and they know what they're going to do as a result of you giving them money. And it makes it so much easier because the big ideas, I mean, I've read grants for a long time and I think I'm really smart. And I read some of these things, I think, I have no idea what they're going to do. If we give them money, I just have no idea what they're going to do. And so you need to think simply and distilled, and then it gets to be elegant. Okay, Gregoire, you've got a question. You have to unmute yourself.
Hi, there I am. I, when you say tell your story, I have struggled. I have condensed a narrative, which I think is pretty poignant. But every time I get into telling my story, they start saying, "Don't do that because it's going to be about you." So when you say tell your story, which puts you in a qualifying position of understanding why what you're trying to create being the need. So I guess the question is, how do I tell my story without telling my story in such a way that it's not made to feel like I'm just, because I started a memoir piece, I got it condensed down to a radio drama. I just went through life experiences of what I had been through that brought me to these conclusions. But then when I start telling that story, it's been told to me that it's like too much about you. So when you said tell your story, I wanted to know what your approach would be.
So when I say tell my story, I don't tell the Lee Heald story. I tell the AHA story. And so I'm talking about philanthropy that is largely based on nonprofit organizations or artists who are going into programs in nonprofit philanthropy. So it's I'm really thinking about the story of your organization, not your personal story, because you have to really think about this is not therapy. This is never about therapy. This is always about mission and purpose and product. And so the backstory of, like, if you were trying to do that play, the backstory of that play has to be short because you're really thinking 3 paragraphs. This is when you went to 4th grade and they said, write, 4x4s or 5x4s, or you read 3 paragraphs that were 5 sentences each. There's a topic sentence, there are 3 supporting facts, and then there's a summary. And you get to do 3 of those paragraphs, and that really is your narrative for most grants. And so you need to really distill, because it's not a long narrative, it's a short narrative. And it is a purpose of what you're doing.
Narrative being separate from story, or that being one and the same.
Well, telling your story should be in the narrative, but it's not really. But when I say story, I'm not talking about the big story of Gregoire. I'm talking about the story of the project.